Bretto, the Brisbane Wellness Base Camp is done, but that doesn't mean it's all over because we're coming to Adelaide.
Hey, Adelaide. We love Adelaide.
The first Wellness Couch event in Adelaide, and a very special announcement is that your mate, the great Damien Christoph, and my mate, 100 Not Out mate, is coming to join us.
Oh, it's going to be a ripper. We twisted his arm, we forced him to come along, and he's great, Damo. He's always funny. Don't tell him I said that. But he's always a wealth of information as well, and people love him. He's just got a great way of getting the nutrition message across in a way that allows people to make real sustainable changes.
You know, it wasn't that he had to twist his arm. He had the FOMOs and not coming to Brisbane. So he's jumping on the plane, coming over to Adelaide. It's Saturday, April 7. 2-for-1 tickets are available with the code I love Damo. That's $197 for 2 tickets, less than $100 per person. Saturday, April 7 in Adelaide. Damien Christoph, Kim Morrison, JP and Andy from Smashed Avocado, Brett Hill, myself. Saturday, April 7, the Wellness Base Camp. Get your 2-for-1 tickets with the code I love Damo. Bretto, see you there.
See you there.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is why we choose not to yell at our children, which we realise could be a little bit of a triggering statement. And we hope that in our usual fashion, we bring a bit of story, a bit of humour and a bit of balanced perceptions when we're actually discussing
what that means.
Philosophy and then the day-to-day, what that looks like.
Yes, practice, shall we say.
Yeah, practice. That's good. That's good. So before we jump into that podcast, I just want to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au and on the front page, sign up to join our tribe with your email address. And once a week, we'll send you a wrap-up email with everything we've put out in the world with links and blurbs so you pick and choose where you want to dive deeper.
And can I just say that everybody on our email list this last week got some stellar insight into my weekend with silent disco. Because if you haven't had an experience of silent disco, let me tell you, if you are organising a hands party, that is your responsibility to find someone who is going to run a silent disco for you and your friends, because I did it and it was the best fun ever.
Oh, I've done it with my kids actually at Christmas time. It's totally segue.
This is a massive segue.
At Christmas time, the Christmas carols locally, they had silent disco going on at the Christmas carols.
That's so cool.
So it's in like this massive, footy oval with everything in the whole shebang of a market and whatnot. And you've got this group of randoms, kids, parents, rocking around doing silent disco around the whole. It was absolute gold. I cannot tell you how much I loved it. It's just the best fun.
It's just like there was, I think, about 15 of us and we all had headphones on, and this guy in full lycra, right at the front, kind of, being the DJ and getting us to do a few little activities. And then we'd spot random people, that we would walk past into Melbourne City and give them the spare headphones and try and pull them into our dance. So we had we were dancing off with Bohemian Rhapsody on Collins Street, it was just the best fun. Because you knew that you were in your own little world and you're kind of trying to pull other people into it.
So this is the amazing stuff you could be missing if you're not on that tribe.
This is the kind of gold. Yes, this is the gold, right?
I hope it's a little better than that generally, but we do usually chuck in there also a bit of what we're loving on in that week, and this is what you're loving on in this week.
Totally.
And I would love to interview the person who started Silent Disco, because I think they would be fascinating. So if you know that person, please let us know as well. Connect at nourishingthemother.com.au. Okay, back to the podcast, Bridget. Can we get back to parenting?
Yes.
For a moment, which is where we love to segue to. And we want to talk today about why we choose not to yell at our kids. Not that is always the reality, but what we do in a philosophy, why we strive towards that, and what we do in repair if we've gone over that. Where do you want to start, Bridge?
Perhaps as we are working through with our tribe in the Loathing to Loving program at the moment, so much of what we value in our life comes from something that we perceive was missing for us. So it comes from this idea of a void that we're looking to fulfill. And that's really what drives you and I in our parenting, I suppose, is this desire for deep connection and communication and understanding in relationship with our children. And so if we come at that with our parenting ideals, then it means that yelling by nature isn't really a relationship that is built on a desire to deeply understand and connect and relate, in a open-hearted way with our children. I guess I really seek in my life relationships that are built on respect. Like, I have a high value on relationships in my life, and I don't see any difference between those adult relationships that I cultivate and the ones that I cultivate with my children. So in a respectful relationship, there would be ideally an opportunity for reflection, apology, connection, and respect that means that you wouldn't really speak to someone the way that you wouldn't like to be treated, in essence. And I think that same thing can apply to how we relate to children. So that is sort of philosophically where I come from. And I also recognize that the children's behaviour is not really intentionally out to get us. The behaviour is a communication largely of something that needs addressing beneath it. The destructive behaviour is not something to be punished, it's something to be understood. So for me to yell at a behaviour means I'm almost missing what it's trying to teach me. And so when I do descend into those moments of raising my voice or not having capacity to hold what's going on, that's largely a reflection for myself to go, okay, what do I need right now to bring myself more into this, or to help my children move through where they're at, as opposed to something that needs to be shut down.
I've got so many points going through my head as you were saying all of that. So many, yes, I know, I get that, blah, 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 happening in my head. What I mean by that is I really understand what you're saying by when we ourselves get triggered enough that we end up yelling. It's because we've hit a trigger and our normal conscious front brain controls have been flooded.
Yeah, they've just been
they're gone,
bypassed.
Yeah, and so you've gone into a period of rage and anger and disconnection, and you're in a trigger. And the very point of that happening is to try and repattern and heal the very incident of why it's there to begin with. So I really totally get what you're saying, that our children, are perfect at pushing these buttons for us, and some of those buttons are more fierce than others of those buttons. And
don't get me wrong, I mean, like, that's their job to take us there. And I get taken there a lot. Because, we wouldn't be in this dynamic with our children if we weren't being faced with this hard stuff. But I guess my active choice is always to not make it about them, but rather it being about the dynamic. Whatever's coming up here is not for me to shut down or punish or make them wrong about. It's for me to almost parent myself through as much as I'm having to parent them, knowing that will help create a healing in the relationship with them, and also the healing of the story in my own psyche that's pushing the button on, right? Until we then obviously get the next challenge. But coming at the position of choosing not to yell means coming at the position of being willing to see, what are they trying to teach me, just as much as what I'm here to try and teach them.
Did your parents yell at you?
I don't remember my mum yelling a lot. I don't really remember a lot of yelling at all, actually, which is interesting that I don't like yelling.
Yeah, I was going to, yeah.
And it's interesting that I haven't really mined in depth my own childhood story. I don't think that there was exceptional communication skills demonstrated. So that's, I think, why I have a high value on communication. So by having a high value on communication and a level of consciousness around our relationships, that's really probably where the non-yelling thing comes from. Not so much the not wanting to recreate the yelling. You know what I mean?
No, I totally get it.
Yeah.
That's just what I assumed that, but was also wondering if, you know, I mean, I totally resonate with what you're saying philosophically, but I wonder if there's people more like me who have experienced the trauma, so to speak, of yelling. And so we're trying to forge a path more intentionally out of the trauma versus out of a void that's wrapped up in a different value. Do you know
Yeah, I do.
what I mean?
I totally do.
And I wondered then if it's easier, in inverted commas, for you not to yell because it's not necessarily a poignant trigger.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I just had that moment.
Yeah,
as I was thinking.
possibly. I mean, and I think for me, probably what was more likely would have been withdrawal and shutdown. Would have been likely the dynamic was for me. I definitely know that my dad wasn't able to relate emotionally particularly well, and he would be quite closed off.
So, is your pattern instinctively, so to speak, to withdraw and shut down, or is it that withdrawal and shutdown around you triggers you?
Yeah, withdrawal and shutdown around me triggers me. Yeah. And so I also feel a strong need when I'm around my kids to be present to them and to be aware as opposed to go off in my own world or not be, you know, playing with them or not be kind of aware of where they're at and conscious of their movements or their emotional state. Because I think that that's almost not safe for me to go back there as where I was as a child and not really, you know, really supported in that way, I suppose. So I think probably that would be where my conscious focus comes from, that desire to feel the connection that I potentially didn't feel.
Yeah,
I mean, I think so much of this you still piece together because I think at every age that our children are at, we kind of get little breadcrumbs of information about what it might have been like for us, how we perceived our own environment.
Because at every age you're hitting a new stage of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is part of what makes that growth so brutal.
Yes, exactly.
For me, when I think about yelling, I have a direct experience of that. So my mum was, I've mentioned so many times before, you know, a roller coaster ride of emotions. And, you know, what came with that was, you know, extreme, you know, yelling and screaming. And I have so many vivid memories of being what felt like slaughtered by screaming words.
Wow.
And I realized this, I pieced this, I'm even I can feel my blood pressure start to change my body as I even like have moments of thinking about those. So, I mean, I've still got so much work to do in unpacking them. And I had this moment, I think I'd said to you, I'd had a run-in with a friend and we did a podcast on that. I can't remember what we called that now. Do you remember the friendship one? I mean,
I can't remember.
I'll try and put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had this friend scream and yell at me on the phone, and then hang up on me, which was 100% what my mum used to do. And I said to Bridget at the time, and it was the strangest thing because I have this person going absolutely fucking nuts on the other end of the phone at me. And instead of any other, I don't know, way that you could fire back, fire up, hang up, I went into freeze. And it was the first time I connected the dots of how I'm hardwired. Because part of me was like, had the story in their head, no, I'm pretty good with conflict because I know how to ground my energy. But really, I think I'm actually programmed to freeze. Because all I could remember is I stopped listening to her words, which is what I'm sure I used to do with my mum. The words was just noise.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so I could hear the noise and the pitch, and all I could hear was my heartbeat and like the whooshing of my blood.
Wow.
Boom, boom. Boom, boom. And my heart rate, I literally felt like my heart rate, my blood pressure just dropped. So I couldn't even hear her noise anymore. All I could hear was my heartbeat. And then the louder she got, the quieter I got, no, that's not what I'm saying. And I thought, this is how I survived my mum, right? And it was in that moment that I went, oh my God, this isn't just, me being oh so fantastic in conflict. This is my survival mechanism. This is me. And I can see whenever we yell, we trigger someone's nervous system. We're screaming at them, which triggers our very primal brain into a stress response.
Yeah.
And we are either going to fight, flight, or freeze. And you will see children pick any one of those autonomic nervous system responses when a parent yells and screams at them. And I started to really pay attention to this. This is only my recent Christmas. And I started to watch it in the families around me going, oh my God, that child fights. That child yells back and gives more sass, and, the whole thing escalates. And the more that mum's screaming, the more that defensive mechanism comes out, and it's, this constant bickering. Oh, that's really interesting. I can see how that child's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm going to hightail it out of here.
Yeah. This ain't safe. I'm getting out of here.
There's flight. And then there's the kid like me. It's not safe to run. It's not safe to scream and yell back. So I will play dead in front of you. And at some point you'll stop paying attention to me.
Yeah. Wow.
And I just thought, oh my God, I actually really for the first time got this as a concept. And I flashed back and I thought all these times I remember when I was first getting into really conscious parenting, and I would read these, in inverted commas, hippie blogs about which you and I, integrate and talk so easily and consciously because it's so integrated in our parenting styles now around, non-punitive discipline. And I remember reading this blog about why you should never yell at your children and feeling triggered by it because I couldn't help but yell at some point at my children and thinking that's just fucking bullshit. Like, what reality hippie la la land is this person living on? Like, this is ridiculous. It's not even, how about we just stack on some more blame and shame and judgment onto mothers and all the ways you're not
guilt.
measuring up and, all the ways that your child is perfect rather than, really fucking annoying sometimes.
Yeah.
And I can so see my thought processes. Back then I can see how it was triggering, and I can see how I hadn't processed myself enough to know how to heal what that was covering, and therefore bring a sense of presence and control not only to myself and my own inner child, but also to my child in those moments, which means I don't need to get to the point of yelling because I can deal with my own trigger on that. But I have such compassion for it because I can still, and it's funny, my voice starts to go funny as which is in itself interesting. I can still feel myself reach those edges sometimes where that's it. I'm like freaking done. Like, just do it. I can feel myself hit those edges often. I wish I wish it wasn't often, but I can feel myself hit those edges often. It's rare that I'll leap into yelling, but I'm not going to say I don't do it because if I've not put enough back in, if I haven't brought enough presence and consciousness to myself and gentleness with my own inner feelings and inner world in that day, I will get to the point where I can't cage my rage.
And I really, really hear that because I've been sitting with that a lot lately. I was thinking sometimes it feels like it's a beast that just with just the right amount of, with just the right trigger would just leap out. And some days it can feel like every effort is made to bring everything that you need for yourself first so that you can not go there. You know what I mean? And so I have such empathy for the dynamics we find ourselves in where that might be a reality. And I would, say, like, be really gentle on yourself. And it's also a values thing. I mean, you and I don't hide behind the fact that this stuff is really important to us. You know, for you, it's way more conscious what that comes from. For me, I'm still figuring it out. But we can't escape our true values. Like, that it's how we live our life. And it's something that you and I it's like a practice, you know, that we dedicate ourselves to daily in terms of how to, you know, raise ourselves in order to raise children.
Which is so funny to say, because I was just thinking as I'm flashing back to my summer camp with this, you know, group of families who go away with sort of 9 or 10 families. So you get to witness some really up close, you know,
I bet.
family living, you know, behind the closed doors, right? Because there are no
doors.
In your camping.
There's no walls.
No, and we were sitting around just all of the parents one night, and the conversation started about how they'd lost their shit with their kids that day, and this and this and this and this and this. And, you know, I listen with humour, and I get it, and I can hear them. And I don't judge them because I can see that they don't have another tool set. Anyway, this one mum joked, and she went, I can't, like, you know, Jade, my daughter, had done this or this or this, whatever it was, I can't even remember. And she goes, and I watched you, and you walked up to her and you got super quiet and you just spoke to her very quietly. And I was like, oh, come on. And so I joked with her about it, which is fine. I was happy to do that because I could see there was part of her that was like, come on, like, you can't possibly hold your shit together. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And so there's part of her that wants that. There's part of her that likes what she sees, and there's part of her that judges herself when she watches me do that. So I really just had compassion for that, and I laughed. Humour is a fantastic way to move through big feelings. I joked about it with her. And then I was sitting with my husband later that night, and I just said, you know, it must be so hard, like, because I know where this friend of mine has come from in her parent, from like the way that she was treated as a child. And it's next level to the way that I was treated. And I was saying to my husband, so the fact that she's showing up here with her children and sure she's yelling is like a lifetime away from the way that she herself was raised. And I was saying I just have such compassion for that. And, you know, I can't judge that mother because I have not walked her path.
Yeah.
And I'm not carrying the voids and the wounds that she has. I'm not carrying that into my parent bubble. I was having this conversation with my husband, and I said, maybe you just can't get to that point. Like, what if your parenting is an evolutionary process and you can only, you know, do your best and it goes so far? And my husband looked at me and he went, what are you talking about? He said, you've experienced this and this and this that she has, and you're not doing what she does. Don't you think you can, like, do it if you want to do it, if you have a conscious enough desire in which to do the self-work to do that? And I went, yeah, that's probably true. So it's probably just not her value.
Yeah, she just might not have a high value on it. It's not enough. It's not painful enough. It's not raw enough. It's not inspiring enough for her to empower new ways of connecting or being with her kids.
So I just found that really interesting. I just, as you were saying that, I was thinking I can really get that, and I witness that in the families that are around us. But I also think you don't need to just be happy with be contented with the status quo of your history. That there is a way to create a much more intentional path forwards for your children. But it actually has to come from you because they're reflecting you.
And the parts that you most want to run away from, like I can think through my head, like, you know, certain times where I know I go from super spacious to just annoyed, you know, and we all have that spectrum within us. And that's there for us to learn from. That's there for us to go, oh, why is it that bothers me so much? And you know this with your partnership dynamics, the things that your kids do to you, like, might fire you up, but if they do the same thing to your partner, it doesn't bother your partner, because we've all got different edges and we're all being taken to those different edges in different ways based on what it is that stirs us up the most, and it's stirring us up for us to learn from it.
So maybe now we've talked about theory and we've talked about why we choose not to yell, because we recognise that there's a bigger dynamic at play, that there's highlighting us to triggers that are seeking our own personal healing and our own story, and that it really is disruptive to both ourselves and our children's nervous systems, that we ultimately all go into fight, flight or freeze. Our brain floods with chemicals and hormones and we no longer are online, connected or able to really make wise choices. So they're kind of all our whys behind why we do our best not to yell.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those times, maybe more practically what we're doing, which I think is always where we move from head to body. We've actually got to bring our body online with our minds, and our mind therefore follow. It's a loop, right? Our mind follows our body and our body follows our mind, and at some point we have to actually integrate the two and bring them back online together to create something. To create something.
To create a path forward, essentially.
Yeah. So let's talk about how we're practically actually doing that. So, Bridget, maybe you could talk me through what is it that takes you to your edge, and what are you doing for yourself within yourself, and what choices are you making for your children in those moments, and why?
So an edge for me is my kids fighting, or largely my son attacking my daughter, because he's the bigger one. She's still 18 months old. And that's a trigger for me because my brother and I didn't really have good communication. Like, we would have a game we call punch and kick and fight, and we used to punch it out and kick it out. He was the great one at punching. I was really good at kicking. And that was sort of largely how we worked through our stuff and likely expressed the family dynamic. And so what I'm really wanting to equip my kids with is an ability to work through their stuff in a more constructive way that doesn't involve hurting each other. So at the moment, like, a trigger for me is when I can see my son, continually doing something to her when she's already upset by it. And I can feel, right, like, this visceral feeling in your body when that wave of anger kind of rises up. And so for me, I do have like a quick moment of parenting myself in that before I leap to, like, the tiger that wants to kind of, rip the, attacker off the prey. And so for me, it really is taking a breath, and it's tuning into what is going on for my daughter. So is she actually really bothered by what's going on, or is it my projection onto the situation?
How can you separate those two?
Oh, sometimes you do it better than others, but I think I try to do it by looking whether she's reacting or not. Like, 'cause sometimes he can be doing things to her, or he can take something from her, and she's not bothered by it.
She's like, whatever.
She's like, whatever. So therefore, I'm not going to go and enter into that if I've, I may have completely misread the situation. It's not my place to enter into the dynamic that is uniquely theirs if something's not a problem. So that is like a first check that I do. And then when it is clearly a problem for her, I give him, reflection. She's clearly upset by what you're doing right now. Can you please stop? Or, even, I know I always use please, let's be honest. And if he continues to do it, it'll be me needing to put my hand in place or do something to stop the action, because with sibling dynamics, his behavior towards her is an expression of something that's going on within him that needs to be moved in a more constructive way. It's often, particularly more lately, because he's going home from school and there's perhaps some powerless going on at school, so he wants to be the powerful one at home. So he wants to take things out on her. So I recognize that, and I'm looking also for that. So that also helps me not get as angry with him as I might if I didn't have that awareness. But certainly it is as much as I can to protect her from being hurt, because she's not at an age where she can start to do that for herself yet, and help him to see the impact of his actions without punishing him when he does continue to go past what I say. It's really, for me, about reinforcing the impact of his choices and his behavior on someone else, as opposed to making him bad or wrong, because I think that the more we can reinforce the impact of their choices and how they hurt other people, they can internalize recognizing that, not internalizing the pain that might come from a parent yelling or, hurting them in some way. I would rather him reflect on his impact and actions on her, not his fear of what I might do. I'm not interested in him fearing me at all. It's never the objective for me. So that's probably how I approach it in a roundabout way.
So how is it that a single breath, you're able to quell yourself with a single breath?
I think I've almost on some level programmed that in me as like it's not about you. It's not about you. Like, you know, separate yourself. Like it's a practice mantra.
Yeah,
it's a practice. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like an affirmation, isn't it? I mean, it influences our psychology, and the more that you practice it,
Yes.
like a meditation practice, like a yoga practice, like strengthening a muscle at gym, the more you do it, the more it becomes your go-to.
And sometimes I will go past my line. Like sometimes I will get, you know, what I recognize as irrationally angry at him for what he's done. And that's usually when I'll then go, look, I'm feeling really angry right now because I can see that you were continuing to hurt her when she was telling you to stop. And that is not okay with me. So that is how I'll come back from, you know, perhaps where I might have overreacted by giving more reason around my overreaction. Just like I want him to be able to use that same language with someone else when they push him too far. You know, I think of all of that as equipping him with communication skills to take into his world, so that the better I can show up with that skill set within me, the more I'm imprinting him with that ability to relate to others in that way. What about you?
I think I'm really pretty great at it now, like without that sounding weird.
Yeah, no, you are. Yeah,
but it's taken me just so long to integrate that as a practice because of the intense emotional ferocity from which I'm birthed.
And I mean, that would be like, talk about dragging yourself over hot coals, kicking and screaming.
That is seriously what it is a bit like, Bridget.
because the level of rewiring that takes when that is completely at odds with what you would have experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely at odds. So how do I do it? Well, you know that I avoid pain with humour. It can also work for you as opposed to always working against you. So I do now have almost a playfulness with my anger. And I recognize that much like parenting, where we move from the strict confines of consciousness to stretching it into playfulness, I think that's a continuum of conscious parenting. I recognize so much that, you know, as adults, well, as children, we started in play, right? We are just enmeshed in play. And then as we grow up, often, you know, that play shrinks until our internal, potentially sexual fantasies are the only area in which play is invited into our world and into our minds and in some way into our bodies, and sometimes not even allowed there. So we eliminate the concept of playfulness. And yet I realize that there is expansion and a toolkit in playfulness that is hard to embrace. It's why it's so hard for us to play with our children. And why it's so hard to choose a playful response over a just stop doing that response. And yet I realize that when we practice our playfulness, that there's this joy that,
and such a release that comes with it.
Yeah, and I think it's almost kind of like that concept that love is more powerful than anything, and it sounds like such a, you know, la kind of concept, but it is actually big enough to overcome the immensity of that caged beast. And yet that caged beast feels so ferocious that the thought of even slipping a paw out feels like it would be a mass murder scene. And yet when I realize I bring the playfulness in, instead of instead of it seeming like it moves away from or it ignores, I don't think I'm articulating it very well, but it expands my capacity. And so whilst it can be a mechanism to numb, when you understand it within yourself, you can begin to play with your playfulness and invite it.
Can you give an example of where you might have chosen to yell, but instead you found that edge and transformed it into play?
Yeah. I think I'm learning that a lot with my son, and then it flows easier. It flows easier with my girls than it does with my son. And I think for me that's probably a programming with the masculine. And so the more I'm learning to invite my play as a mother, the more I can invite my play with my partner, and the more I can expand my play with my partner, the more I can expand my play with my son. Like it's very much an interweaving loop, which you and I both know in terms of dynamics. So, and my son is really interesting because if I consciously choose anything other than play with him, it never goes very well. And
he doesn't like that when you get firm.
No, but it wouldn't matter if it was firm or if it was asking for conscious talk.
Right.
Or like it doesn't even have to be a firm bound. Like it's anything
that's not play.
Yeah. That's not play. But play morphs as they get older. It transforms and it changes what that looks like. And it will instantly go into stonewalling, so that shutdown and withdrawal. And I think I've said to many times that storm moves inwards rather than being an outwards expression. And it just dives deeper and deeper and bigger within him, as opposed to the hitting and kicking that you might experience in someone else. And that for me is actually terrifying because I know how far he can go within himself, and I find that expression far harder than an external one, because when you don't have any point of contact with someone, how do you save them? You know?
Yeah.
So for me, particularly when I expand that out as a teenager and a man in the world, I'm scared of losing my connection with him. If I'm honest about it, I am.
Yeah.
So for me, when he goes into that abyss, I really have to sit with my own feelings of fear, which I'm sure is also patterned, but I just haven't got there yet for me. Anyway, so can I think of one example? I wish I could just pull one out at the moment, but there'll be many where, I don't know, do you know what? He was an absolute horror yesterday. Yeah. He'd had a sleepover Saturday night. So yesterday was Sunday. So he'd had a sleepover Saturday night and they didn't sleep. Maybe an hour they slept.
Oh, God.
So apparently he tried to go to bed at like 12:30 because he's shattered because he plays so much sport, right? So he tried to conk out at 12:30. None of the kids would let him, so they were pulling his doona off him and shoving chips down his top and, all this stuff. So, of course, now he's up. He's up again. They just keep going and this is what happens. So he's had like an hour's sleep. Nick's picked him up. He's had to go to mass because we're in sacramental season, and then he's done 2 hours of training.
Oh my God.
And I'd already planned in my day, this is how we get through our weekend so that I'm spacious for my Monday, is Sunday we have an hour of power together. So Sunday hour of power within the family is when everybody powers through an hour and we get the whole house cleaned between all of us within an hour. It's like freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And I was pretty dead set that we were having an hour of power. And he walked in the house and he looked horrendous. He just looked like it was like a glimpse into the worst hangover you've ever had in your life. Like he had this hair that was oily and flopped in his face. He had his hoodie on and his track pants, and he hardly wears hoodies and things because he gets too hot because he's running around all the time. And it was like moody teenager. He had the cords pulled around his hoodie and he had his hands in his pocket and he's all mopey and he just kept wanting to lie down. Like he just wanted to lie on the couch and he just wanted to go to bed and just super bad attitude.
Yeah.
And and his dad and I were like, come on, an hour of power. Woo! We're going to get this house clean. And he's like, I'm not doing it. But not even I'm making it funny. It wasn't funny at all. And I can't remember what we did. So we were playing around with him and he's like, come on, Heath, don't be so moody. And I'd like squish his cheeks. And he'd give me a sort of smile. He's like, or he'd get the Nick's part if he was down the hallway. He was getting the vacuum cleaner out of the closet in the hallway. And we had the mattress because the girls had to sleep over the mattress lying across the wall. And Nick said he's like half asleep hanging off the mattress, pretending like he's reaching for the vacuum cleaner, and Nick's like, how you going there? Like hanging out on the mattress. And he's like, I'm fine. He's walking down the hallway with the vacuum and going, you look so amazing vacuuming. You were just killing me. I don't know, you just kind of ham it up and play. And
were you able to pull him out of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done.
Well, not like he bang snapped back.
Yeah.
He had nothing left, but enough that he did what I wanted to do, and he looked super cranky. And then he'd do something, and we'd just poke him a little, or and he'd flick a smile, and then he could do back, and then we poke him again, and and then he went and crashed out, which he never does. Sleeps during the day, and we had to get him up to go to a family function. And my husband's asked him 3 times to get up. He can't even wake up.
Oh my God.
And so Nick starts getting the water and he just pours it. He goes, you have to get up. Get up. And he's like, oh, what are you doing with the water? He goes, Nick walks out, comes back, he's asleep again.
Oh my
God. A little bit of water. You have to get up. Walks out. So I'm giggling. So he can hear me giggling. So now it's like Nick and I giggling because we're pouring water in Agnes' head. And it's just pretty funny.
Yeah.
And walks out and Nick goes, next time, Heath, it's going to be a big bit of water. Not a little bit. Like this. And he's like, oh my God, I hate you. Like this. And he gets up. And sometimes we play a little bit with just the concept of, I guess in a way it's integrating sexuality and sensuality within our household and creating a uniship of parents that is non-verbal. So, he's at that age where he notices if we're being too affectionate or, this is gross or that's like, oh, what are you doing? So we'll have it up and we'll have this pretend, pash or, oh my God, I love you so much in front of him or we'll just grab him.
Leg hump.
Yeah, well, probably not quite that much, but just really, ham that up. Just, oh my God, you're just the best. Or we'll grab him and go, oh my God, you're so beautiful. I just love you so much. It's just play, but our play, I guess, plays with his edges. And we know his edges enough that if he flicks into anger and he starts to move a little bit, I go, that didn't work. Okay, let's try something else at the play. And so we keep going through our repertoire, and I know that I'm on a good wicket when I can integrate touch with my play. And as soon as he responds to my touchful play, I know I've got him. If he disconnects further, I've chosen the wrong play. So it's a bit of learning what works for that child, I think. And I play a lot with affirmation. So a lot of, oh God, I love you even when you're cranky. I freaking love you so bad. And trying to drag them into an embrace, which they're so, if you can play with it, I'm not going to force. I never force, we've said, sorry, let's have a hug and make up. I never do that. I viscerally hated that as a child. So I won't do that to my kids. Touch has to be on their terms, and I'm pretty passionate about that. But you can play with small touch. You can play with a grab and a bear hug and a release. You can play with, a touch and a brush on a forearm. You can play with, squishing a cheek and brushing some hair, small bits of touch.
And you can also put the play, this probably works more for younger children, but you can also put it in the ball in their court. One of the ones that we do a lot is, oh, if you do that again, it must mean you want to have 1,000 kisses, so, and then he'll do that thing that I don't want him to do, and then that's the invitation into the connection through that game. So I love that because it's such a really nice way to break the disconnect, which is ultimately what
they're seeking more connection when they're disconnected, but they don't know how to get it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what I think is, how do I handle my own anger beast is by also playing. So if I can take myself less seriously, if I can ham it up, if I can bring in the humor, and sometimes I fake it till I make it, honestly. Like sometimes, you know, they could say, either of them, of my older two, could say something really like just disgustingly disrespectful. And what I want to do is just like smack them down and go on so many levels. It's not okay. And what I found is that if I can just kind of laugh at the comment, and sometimes I force myself to laugh, as soon as I've released that forced laugh, then I'm like, oh, no, I'm okay. I'm away from that edge. Because it's taken me to a wounded place, and I'm reading it as not my child who can't control themselves, hasn't learned how to, doesn't know how to, doesn't have, and they're not attacking me. I've made it really personal because they represent all of those memories and those people who I perceive were attacking me. So if I can just pattern interrupt in those triggers enough to get through that initial 5 seconds, I'm going to be okay.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? It's like the circuit breaker. It's the circuit breaker that almost has to lift you out of the fog of that repatterning, that constant repatterning, to go, oh, yeah, hang on. Like, no, I don't need to react like that. I can bring more presence to this.
And to remember, I think, you know, it is the job of a parent to be the teacher. You know, and yes, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, our children teaching us. Yes, they absolutely do. But it's also our job to realise that whatever they're saying or doing, whilst it feels deeply personal, is not. They're learning and they're experiencing. And so the fact, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to it, right? I mean, it's just they're there pressing those sweet spots in our personal dynamics and family dynamics for a reason, for us. But they themselves are not deliberately attacking us, even when they're saying, I hate you, I can't believe you did this to me, it's still, I still look at them as this hurting person who's hurting. They're not actually hurting me, not really intentionally. They just don't know what to do with what's inside of them. And I'd take that role of, you know, for me to be helpful, I have to remove my own personal inner little hurt child who most likely was that child, you know, that's reflected in front of me, who was just trying to get some needs met, not because they really wanted to take that person down in front of them. So I think when you can remove, you know, when you really get clear on that your triggers is your stuff and what they're experiencing is completely different. Like you were saying, I really look to my daughter to see, is this affecting her or is this my reaction to what's happening? It's the same thing, just in different contexts. And I think the better you get at recognizing your triggers, the better you get at putting in place and practicing pattern interrupts for the first 5 to 15 seconds. You're going to be okay. But you have to really get clear on what your trigger is, what its almost aura or warning signs are, and put in place the practice for those physical tools there. And then you widen your window of tolerance for how long you can hold spaciousness for before it becomes, well, hang on, I got to check out. It's going too far for me. I lost my train of thought there, but that's my thoughts on it is play. Invite your playfulness. You know, I realize the older I get, the less serious I realize we need to be. And yet we're so sold that seriousness is like to be conscious, is to be, you know, deeply thinking and having these huge conversations all the time.
I mean, I think our kids show us way all the time, and I've noticed that I've been feeling an edginess at dinner time because of, like, you know, Sylvie loves to throw stuff off the dinner table, and I just feel that edge of discomfort. And I always often think, you know, is this how I was feeling when my kid, when I was looking across at my mum when I was 4 or 2 or whatever it was, because dinner time can bring up a lot of triggers for people, like the whole mealtime thing. And like tonight, like I really just sat with that and noticing this pattern in me and thinking, why am I on this edge? And instead of being serious, as you say, I really leapt into that playfulness and it was so beautiful because, it allowed both of my kids to direct the play. It allowed them to, laugh and connect and gang up on me. And it just released so much tension that I could feel had been building in that dynamic of dinner time. Which, we keep getting presented, like, whatever it is that's tension-filled moment of transition or connection in our family, like that brewing sense of disconnection is there for us to sort of, lean into and tease apart. And play can be such a beautiful way to do that.
I totally agree with you. Where do you want to go? I was having flashbacks in my head. Sorry.
Well, I can totally see you kind of zoning,
disappearing.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, we use song a lot. We make up songs.
Yeah.
Do you guys?
Yeah,
do
we do that too. Yeah.
And I was just thinking, it's exactly what my daughter does. Even my 4-year-old at kinder teacher the other day, a marvelous song from Lola. I was like, oh, that's wonderful. That's what we do at home. And so they can, have the opportunity to move their body and process their feelings in a verbal way at the same time through song. So, we often do that. We, ham it up and make up songs. And anyway, I was having a flashback to that and thinking my son will never join into it, but he'll watch it enough to crack up and get out of his funk. So
yeah, nice. And
I don't know.
That's kind of enough in itself. Isn't it? Yeah.
So I guess that's it, Bridge. We just really want to leave you with you really, you can open up, you can show up and transform your family relationships. I mean, I know that's our L2L tagline, but it's really the crux of what we see this parenting gig as.
Absolutely.
And, loosening up is often the hardest part, right? Because it's so tightly wound.
Totally. I really think that loosening up thing and that willingness to not have to be the powerful one and to not have to have it your way and, all of those things can really be the pathway. Yeah, it's really the pathway to connection.
But I think we banter about the word surrender, probably a bit too much, that we've kind of lost its intent and its meaning. And I think it's much harder than what we perceive surrender should be. So, and the more you surrender in one area, the more it, spills out into the other areas of life too. So, with that in mind, come join us for Aligned Parenting in April. We're kicking off mid-April and we really want to dive deeper, and every time we do it, want to go deeper and deeper into what that expansion looks like, what our family dynamics are revealing to us, because we are both just gut-wrenchingly absorbed in how perfect our family dynamics are, and when we start to realise the genius behind them, that we can actually bring a level of gratitude and therefore a choice.
And more capacity for greater depth too, which is really lovely.
So jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs and look up Aligned Parenting and come join us in April for that. So for $150 you get 2 weeks with us, and we give you all the tools and tips for aligning your parenting and bringing your focus. Perhaps you've gone too far one way or the other, or you're feeling a bit toolless. This is the upskill. So come join us for 2 weeks for that. You can reach us on socials at Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. We do love your topic suggestions. We love your private messages. We love your emails. So please keep them coming. We really do adore being able to address and go where you want to go and have these conversations with other conscious mums, because you're a tribe just like us.
Yes.
To connect with you, Bridge,
it's suburbansandcastles.com, and you, Jules,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com. And
remember to nourish the mother to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.